6:43, let's go through some of the headlines this morning with writer and journalist Emma Wolfe and the editor of Spiked, Tom Slater. Good morning to you both. Good morning. Tom, let's start with the Sunday People, should we? And forever a hero.
Yes, so the Sunday People, as with most of the newspapers this morning, going with celebrations of the life of Bobby Charlton, who, of course, you've been talking about all morning. There's so much across the inside pages. I think partly making tribute to his tremendous footballing achievements, talking about the tragedies in his own life as you had. But there's also a kind of sense throughout this of him being a kind of representative of a kind of more decent sort of era, you know, that so many kind of tributes to him as an individual as well as him as a sporting hero, and that sense that there's kind of something that's been lost with the kind of passing of that generation.
And more than just a footballer to me, because, I mean, I've never been that into football, but my goodness, I know Bobby Charlton and he matters. No,
completely. And it's interesting as well, you know, hearing Aidan talking before the break about, you know, his records not being overtaken until Wayne Rooney comes to the fore and so on. But at the same time, just because of that kind of lack of glory and winning at the top level at the World Cup and at the European Championships and so on for so long, they're still very kind of emblazoned in the national consciousness in a way that even some of the recent players who on paper might have overtaken him in their respective positions still don't have that kind of status, definitely.
Yeah, and they say that when you watch some old footage of his goals and some of his amazing moves, it doesn't look old and antiquated. It still stands up to today's sort of standards of football.
No, completely.
He was blinking good at what he did.
Absolutely, and you see that from all of the kind of praise through all of the different kind of generations of footballers that you read in the newspapers this morning. Everyone recognising him as a tremendous talent, first and foremost, as a legend of the game, but also so many tributes to him as an individual, as seemingly never had a...
Does he mean
no one
much
has a bad word to say.
Yeah, I mean, I should dislike him because I'm a lifelong Liverpool fan and obviously Manchester United. But no, I mean, look at the front page of the Star. Our hero, tears for World Cup legend Sir Bobby Charlton, the nicest man in football. And it's lovely, it's that humane side of the man coming through, which we haven't always seen, let's be honest, in professional footballers. They haven't always covered themselves in glory over the past few decades.
And there's something just amazing about the 66 team.
Of course there is.
There?
Of course
and we've only got one left now, Sir Geoff Hurst. He's the only one left now.
Yeah.
Emma, in The Observer...
Yeah.
I mean, we heard it from Amir Oren, who we're talking to in Tel Aviv earlier on.
Yeah.
The idea now that, in fact, Israel has sort of ceded control to the United States with what it's doing in this war.
I mean, Israel are coming under increasing pressure to launch a preemptive strike on Hezbollah, the Iran-backed militia in Lebanon. But they're also coming under pressure from the US not to do so, and you know, from international allies. I think what this is all about is a real sense of contagion, of conflict. Obviously, it's a terribly complicated situation, with this looming ground invasion possibly, you know, unfolding over the next few days, well, likely to unfold over the next few days, is the sense. And I think people are also now becoming aware of just how febrile and dangerous the situation is on many fronts, you know, circles within circles. Who is backing whom and who is striking on whom, and this is really... You know, Israel, for now, they're saying they want to focus on Gaza and finish the job there, as though it's going to be that simple, because, of course, finishing the job there then ignites all sorts of other issues, and a huge amount of civilian life will be lost, whatever the military casualties.
Yes, I just don't know quite how they... Because even if they could clear every civilian from the north to the south...
Which they can't.
...and then bomb it... And then,
but it's a city.
But it's like, what do those people go back to?
What do they go back to? But also, this isn't just any city. This is the most densely populated city, I think, in the world. But you can't fight in cities. You can't fight with Hamas melting in and out of the civilian population, embedding themselves in hospitals, in schools. It just simply doesn't... Well, not in a casualty-free way.
No.
You can't. You don't just have soldiers.
No. Meanwhile, in the Sunday Times, Emma, they're claiming a Hamas chief is in a British council house.
This is one of those stories which it feels big, but also it's kind of you know, what and what. Basically, the story in the Sunday Times is a really interesting investigation. They've found that this Hamas, he's a fugitive who ran the group's terrorist operations in the West Bank, Mohammed Qasim Sawala. Fled Israel and managed to make his way here in the 1990s, and he obtained a British citizenship. He then has got himself embedded, you know, quietly, living quietly here. Lives in North London, in Barnet, in the most Jewish local authority in the entire country. It has a fifth in Barnet, has a fifth of all the Jews, 56,000 Jews in this country. So it couldn't be more Jewish.
You'd look for him.
He's within a few miles of 2 synagogues, and this is a man who, as late as 2019, was flying out to Moscow, meeting with Putin's henchmen. So he...
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, it's clear that he hasn't been active in Hamas in any illegal sense in this country, but it raises a lot of questions. He bought a very expensive... he bought an expensive council house with a whopping discount, lives there with his 4 children, I think, has no mortgage, and is living quietly in this country. My question would be, it's clear from the report that he hasn't done anything wrong specifically, but is this the kind of person we should be giving British passports to? Is this what we want when we talk about British citizenship? Given that we know, OK, Hamas as an entire organisation wasn't prescribed until 2021. When he came over in the 1990s, early 2000s, it was only the military wing that was proscribed. So... I think it's very clear that the Home Office has dropped the ball here, that they hadn't looked into his background. Because when you have innocent people who want to give to this country who can't get British passports, who can't get British citizenship, is this the kind of man that we want here?
Yeah, I mean, the worry is if we have missed this... And it's the front page lead of the Sunday Times says Hamas chief lives in British.
And how do you feel if you are a Jew living in Barnet right now?
That is so arresting. That
and there have been other examples as well of there being this tremendous slackness. I always remember Salman Abedi, the Manchester arena bomber, was allowed to essentially travel back and forth from Libya, fighting in the Libyan civil war with Libyan Islamists, where it's very much understood that's where he learnt to make explosives. That's where he plied his trade in jihad and so on, to then come back and make this attack. And there's this kind of cluelessness that it's hard to get a grip on. Why were these things not kind of picked up on? How are people allowed to move back and forth, even representing the interests of Hamas and so on, well into the 2000s, the late 90s, about that being a thing?
In a way, that we just missed these things.
OK, Tom, in the Sunday Telegraph, what's the US telling us here in number 10?
Yes, so this is a discussion that's been rumbling on for some time, to put it lightly, between the US and the UK, putting a lot of pressure on the UK to formally prescribe the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which are very much seen, kind of founded as the sort of protectors of the Iranian Revolution, if you like, but also seen to be involved in all kinds of things beyond its own borders. This is something which has been a pretty torturous point for the British Foreign Office in particular, which seemingly out of a desire to not inflame diplomatic tensions with Iran, therefore has held back from prescribing this particular group. But
as terrorists.
Exactly, and with all the sanctions that come with that. But obviously, given what has happened in Israel, given the pogrom in Israel, given the fact that we know that Iran has funded Hamas and armed Hamas for a very long time, although how much they knew about this specific atrocity is something which is constantly being debated and reported on. New pressure coming from Washington for James Cleverly, for the Foreign Office to do something about.
Yeah, I don't know what I think about that, in the sense that you do wonder it's about secondary implications, isn't it?
Of course it is.
What actually would it do? It would stir things up even more.
Yes, it would escalate the...
Yeah, I think the word is inflame. I mean, this whole region is a tinderbox, isn't it? And language matters. And I'm so frustrated all week. I feel that we're getting caught up in whether the BBC used the term terrorist or not. Again, here, does it matter? Does anyone care whether they are prescribed or not? Of course it matters. But also, what is actually happening? Is there anything... I don't know, there's just so much rhetoric around this and not that much positive action. And I sort of despair.
We've all got to be careful, haven't we, I suppose? Of course. And that's what the sensitivities that we're looking at, everybody, diplomatically, politically. OK, and that comes down to, yes, protests, which, of course, are going to go on, aren't they? We're going to see them every weekend, if not during the week as well. And Emma, in the Telegraph, you found the report that police are being criticised for allowing a jihad chant at the protest yesterday.
Yeah, so this is the Met Police. They've been also, like Israel, coming under increasing pressure from many, many critics saying, hang on a minute, these huge protests which are happening now in London regularly at weekends, and as you say, Anne, probably only going to increase, are going to become a regular feature, for not cracking down. I think the latest is that out of around an estimated 100,000 protesters yesterday, they seem to have made 10 arrests.
Right.
I think it comes down as well to how it's the interpretation of the word jihad. The Met Police have made the point. There were people chanting jihad, jihad, jihad. the Met Police are making the point, as if we're meant to trust them when they can't even arrest shoplifters, that they're making the point that they have specialist terrorist, experts in this area, that they understand the meaning of the word jihad, that it wasn't meant as we interpret it in a holy war, in a terrorist sense, that they are assessing the video very carefully. This was a huge protest yesterday, organised by Hizb ut-Tahrir, which is an extremist Islamic group.
Well, that's who organised it.
Yes, and many people in central London yesterday, caught up in it, felt that it was, pretty hot, pretty febrile situation. Is this the kind of thing we want to have on our streets? And
well, no, but again, it boils down to that same argument, though. As much as you may not like it, if you then go in heavy-handed and arresting everyone who shouts jihad...
It's just interesting what the Met Police do and don't crack down on,
Well, yeah, but would it not cause... would it just not inflame more protests, more...
No, you're right. You're right. I don't come down on either side. And I think, again, of course, the majority were probably protesting peacefully.
But where do you draw the line? Because you have to draw it somewhere, don't you?
You do. You do.
And
have
I mean,
to draw
I
the
always
line
understood jihad was the worst sort of holy war, and to have it chanted in an organised fashion on the streets of London.
I mean, they didn't crack down on. They didn't, because Stephen, they didn't crack down on the women who had paragliders, pictures of paragliders on the back of their hoodies.
No.
So they are choosing to take a light touch on this, and that may be the right strategy.
It may,
but it's a choice.
I can understand people at home or listening or watching thinking, no, you need to tackle that.
It's never that.
Just it's never that easy.
You cause an incident that you may have been able to avoid.
But I think many Jewish people and many others are feeling extremely hurt and shocked and frightened right now. And seeing these protests, and I'm not anti the protesters at all, seeing these protesters weekend after weekend and living in this city, we have to think of them.
But it's also you have to
remember October the 7th.
I think with these protesters, you need to, I don't know, but how many of them are just saying, as some of these celebs seem to be saying, all we're concerned about is Palestinian civilians.
And we all are.
Well, in fact, a lot of them, and some of the chants that are used, are actually, in effect, calling for the destruction of Israel.
No, exactly. I mean,
and this is the problem. I don't think people understand the nuances of it.
No, not at all. And there is so many different elements to it. There'll be some people who might just see the images on television and want to come out. But, this has been a feature of supposedly pro-Palestine demonstrations for many years now, which is in and amongst people just trying to express their solidarity and whatever, is an incredibly strong anti-Semitic element, is an incredibly strong...
And they're part of it.
...element, exactly, often involved in actually organising these things. You're hearing explicitly anti-Semitic chants, kind of Arabic war cries, which date back to... points in which armies had kind of, razed whole Jewish villages. There's all these kind of references which...
Calling Palestine a concentration camp, that's a very, very loaded term.
Comparisons of Israel to the Nazis, there was a lot of that yesterday. There was some really sickening placards that you saw pictures doing the rounds. I think, if nothing else, it's shown us what we're up against in terms of we have a very significant domestic problem with anti-Semitism, with an extreme obsession with Israel, which has morphed into something deeply ugly and indeed racist. And it's shown that, this is something that's not going to be solved by police making a few arrests. There's a deeper kind of social issue that we have to confront and take very seriously.
Well, I'll tell you what, look, we've only got 1 minute left. Can we end on something, I think it's lighter, about these extremely rare fossils being flown into space?
Yes,
by
why?
Virgin Galactic.
Yes, so it was a bit of a scandal in South Africa where they signed off on a couple of very rare fossils from kind of two forerunners of human beings, if you like, which have been discovered in South Africa. Very, very precious. And South African billionaire was able to kind of carry them in his pocket on a Virgin Galactic flight into the atmosphere, causing all this big row about how you letting...
The novelty being that suddenly these, from the birth of mankind up into space.
Exactly. But
a bit of a stunt, really, yeah?
It was, and many people pointing out that, you're not supposed to move these things from museum to museum without the utmost care, yet you've allowed the billionaire to stick it in his pocket and
take them into space.
So that's caused a big incident amongst the international paleontology crowd, which is not something you can say every day, I suppose.
Very odd.
Look, hang on a minute, there's all sorts of space junk up there that they've left. What's wrong with a few rare fossils?
Oh, there you go. Emma, Tom, good to see you. We'll catch you a little bit later on, thank you. Much more, of course, on Sir Bobby Charlton coming up. And we're going to be talking to the former England manager, Sam Allardyce, in just a few minutes.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter